A father sold his daughter, seeing her as a burden and her body as the source of his shame. He thought he was getting rid of a problem, but the mysterious beer saw not a victim, but a weapon. Just wait until you hear how the girl came back to fight for her freedom. In this story, evil will face the very power it created. If you're ready to find out how this story ends, like and subscribe to the channel. Let's go! Dust settled slowly on the broken furniture of the shack. Thomas, a stooped man with a worn-out face, stared at his empty land. The drought had taken the last of his crops, and now his debts were more than he could ever pay. Bankruptcy was not just a threat, it was a sentence that would strip him of everything. In his despair, he saw only one way out, and that way cost him his daughter. Sarah, a 16-year-old girl, was his burden. He looked at her large, clumsy body and saw not just excess weight, but a lack of will, a laziness. Her wild temper and inability to conform in a world that demanded obedience made her difficult. In her father's eyes, she was just another failure, a source of his shame. He made a deal. He set a meeting. And now, he waited. By evening, a mountain man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and massive, his skin tanned from the sun, his face a map of scars. Thomas nervously clutched the pouch of coins he had just received. The mountain man glanced at Sarah. He studied her, her stubbornly slumped shoulders, her determined but frightened gaze. He asked no questions about her, instead scrutinizing her as if she were not a person, but a valuable, unfamiliar object. Thomas turned and left, abandoning Sarah with this silent stranger. For the first time in her life, her rebellious spirit was replaced by panic. Her father, her only family, had simply sold her. She stood frozen, watching the mountain man approach. His gaze lingered on her face. It was not the look of an owner, nor a predator. It was the look of a man who saw something in her that her father did not. He saw something he needed. And he had a plan. Several days passed. She expected a nightmare, cruel treatment, humiliation, and endless labor. But instead, she found herself on a long, grueling journey through the wilderness. He didn't carry her baggage or help her, but he didn't rush her either. He walked ahead, moving with incredible ease, while she struggled to keep up, stumbling over roots and stones. Her clumsy body, which had always been a source of ridicule, now felt twice the burden. She expected him to get angry or scold her for her slowness, but he never once raised his voice. Their relationship was built on complete silence. When she began to limp, he would stop and point to certain herbs, showing her how to use them to ease the pain. When she was tired, he simply sat and waited, as patiently as a part of the landscape. She saw how he navigated the forest as if he knew every bush, every tree. He taught her without words, showing her which berries were safe and which were poisonous, and how to find clean water in the dry ground. Sarah felt her initial fear give way to a deep sense of confusion. This man was not the monster she had imagined. He didn't see her as a burden. He saw a person he could teach, and his lessons were harsh but fair. Her body, which had always been her curse, now seemed to be becoming a tool for survival. He wasn't trying to change her. He was showing her how to use what she had. This was not a punishment. But what was it? With every step she took, she understood less, but her curiosity grew. A few more days of exhausting travel, and they arrived at a hidden canyon. Sarah expected to see a hermit's gloomy lair, but a secret clearing opened up before her. A few neat log cabins, a well-tended garden where vegetables grew, and a clear stream where fish sparkled. This was not a beast's den, but a real home. She saw people. An old woman with a wrinkled but kind face was tending to flowers. A young man, one-eyed but strong, was carving a wooden figure. A girl with a limp sat on a log, laughing as she told something to a boy. They were all unlike the people from her past life. They were wounded, but not broken. They lived here, and they were happy. The mountain man had brought her here. He was not a hermit. He was a leader who had gathered those rejected by society. His scars and silence no longer seemed like signs of cruelty, but marks of endured trials. He didn't give orders, but simply nodded to one of the men, who immediately helped them. Sarah's gaze swept over the faces of these people. For the first time in her life, she saw those who were different, but felt no shame for it. This canyon was not a prison. It was a sanctuary. This was not a punishment. But why had he done it? With each passing day in this secret canyon, Sarah changed. She learned not just to survive, but to live. She helped in the garden, learned to work with wood, and most importantly, felt needed for the first time. Her body, once a source of shame and rejection, now served her. Strong arms carried logs, and resilient legs helped with work. She became a part of the community, a part of this new, strange family. One day, the mountain man led her into his cabin. He unrolled a large, worn map on a table. It was a plan, not just for a settlement, but for a whole network of such sanctuaries. Then he took a folded document from his belt and placed it on the table. It was her bill of sale, signed by her father. He slowly tore the paper in half. In that moment, Sarah understood everything. Her father had sold her out of weakness and debt. But this man had not bought her for punishment. He had bought her to save her. And not just her. His plan was to create a force that could stand against those who so easily took away people's families and hope. He wasn't just building a refuge for outcasts. He was building an army to fight injustice. He said not a word, but his gaze was more eloquent than any speech. He pointed to the map, then to her. He was offering her a choice. She could stay, in safety, forever hidden from the world that had rejected her, or she could become a part of his plan. Sarah looked at the torn bill of sale, then at the map, and her heart beat faster. For the first time in her life, the choice was entirely her own. She looked up at the mountain man. There was no fear or doubt on her face, only a calm, firm resolve. He saw this, nodded, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Their fight was just beginning. Several months passed in relative peace. Sarah became self-assured, mastering all the survival skills. The world beyond the canyon seemed to have forgotten them, and she began to believe that their sanctuary would forever remain a secret. But one morning, the lookout gave a signal. The creak of wheels and the clatter of hooves echoed from beyond the canyon. For the first time in a long time, the peace was broken. The mountain man rose. Everyone in the settlement grabbed a weapon: shovels, axes, bows. Sarah took an old rifle she had found in the cabin. She stared at the canyon entrance, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. 3 figures on horseback appeared. In front rode her father, Thomas. His face was pale and angry, and behind him, like shadows, rode 2 armed men. He had found her. He had come back. But he hadn't come back to save her. He had lost all the money, and now wanted to sell her again or turn her in to collect the bounty for capturing the fugitive mountain man. He looked at Sarah. His eyes widened in surprise. He didn't see the clumsy, frightened girl he had left behind. Before him stood a slender, strong young woman, her face, once pale with resentment, now glowing with health. Her eyes no longer hid, but looked straight at him with a mischievous spark. He saw not just her transformation. He saw a woman, and for the first time in his life, he felt fear. She was ready to defend her new home. She was ready to fight for her new family. The silence of the secret canyon was shattered by Thomas's voice. He shouted, demanding the return of his property. His hired men, 2 burly men with rifles, moved behind him, but their eyes were wary. They saw not just farmers, but a united group of people ready to defend themselves. "I sold you, and you're mine," Thomas screamed, his face red with rage. "You're my punishment, my failure." Sarah stood tall, her rifle lowered, but her posture showed complete readiness. She looked at her father, and in her gaze there was no hatred, only a deep, sad pity. "You didn't sell me," she said calmly, her voice firm. "You tried to get rid of your own failure. You traded me for money to escape your problems. But I owe you nothing more." The mountain man stood beside her, silent and motionless. His presence was more powerful than any words. The other inhabitants of the canyon surrounded them, each with whatever they could use as a weapon. They were no longer a bunch of outcasts, but a single family. Seeing their resolve, Thomas's hired men began to back away, unwilling to get into a fight. Thomas looked at his daughter, then at the mountain man, then at the torn paper Sarah had pulled from her bosom. On her face, there was no longer a trace of the clumsy, frightened girl he had abandoned. In that moment, he realized that he had lost her forever. And not because she ran away, but because he himself had given her up. The hired men turned their horses and rode off. Thomas was left alone, empty and defeated. He said no more words. The mountain man pointed him toward the road, and Sarah simply watched him leave. She felt no joy or malice, only emptiness. She was now truly free. It was the first battle they had won. But they all knew it was only the beginning of their war. In the secret canyon, silence reigned. The inhabitants buried the fallen, bandaged their wounds, and repaired the fortifications. Their first victory was bought with blood, but fear had departed, replaced by a grim determination. Now they knew they could fight back. Sarah sat on a cliff, watching the sunset paint the sky in crimson hues. The mountain man sat beside her. They didn't exchange words, but spoke with their eyes. His plan, which had begun with a desperate deal at an auction, had now turned into a war for freedom. And she, the one considered a burden, had become the heart of this resistance. "The Baron will return," he finally said. "And next time, he'll bring more. We'll be ready," Sarah replied. Her voice was calm, devoid of any past uncertainty. The mountain man nodded. He looked at her strong, confident figure, at her clear gaze, and saw not just a rescued child. He saw the future. This was not his world, but their world, which they had to build together. Their fight was not just for survival. It was for a new life. With the first rays of the sun, they descended to their new family to begin preparations for a new day. The canyon was defended, but the battle for the whole world was just beginning. And now they knew that in this war, they were not alone. Years passed. The canyon, once a quiet refuge, became the heart of a new war for freedom. Their ranks were swelled by new people, exhausted refugees from the Baron's lands, former slaves, and those who could not find their place in a cruel world. The story of the girl who was sold and the mountain man who saved her became a legend, passed in whispers through settlements. Sarah was no longer the frightened girl. Her face became wiser, her gaze firmer. She was a leader and a warrior whose tactics and resolve brought them many victories. They no longer hid. Now they struck at the Baron, liberating his workers and seizing his lands to create new, free settlements. Finally, the day came when the mountain man and Sarah stood on a hill, looking at what was once the Baron's main residence. His citadel was empty, his power destroyed. His world had fallen. Beside them stood their people, the army of outcasts. They looked not at the ruins, but at the dawn rising over the lands that now belonged to them. It was not just a victory. It was the beginning of a new era, where everyone was free. And at the head of that era stood the one who was once considered useless. Her story had ended, but their fight was just beginning.